working for you. I'm not a Dominion spy.
Oh, here we go again. These little conversations of ours always follow the same pattern. You start out confused, then you get angry, then you deny everything, until finally the walls inside your mind start to break down and you accept the truth.
She is a Cylon agent. In my opinion, she should be locked up before she could do any more damage.
Your picture's on that photograph. Every piece of equipment in your laboratory will be dismantled and quarantined. And every person that you've met will be questioned and investigated.
Good day and welcome to Battlespace 9, Episode 8, featuring Deep Space Nine's Inquisition and Battlestar Galactica's 6 Degrees of Separation. I'm Carl, and these are our guests.
Hi everyone, my name is Caleb Coy. I am the Director of Operations at Night Shift Media Group, and I ran a show for a while called Set Condition 1, where a couple of us who are longtime fans of the Battlestar Galactica reboot, the 2004 show, were joined by a completely fresh fan, had never seen the show at all before. We did a full watch through the entire series. A lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Michael Fight. I'm the Director of Content Development over at Night Shift Media Group, and I was the Gaius Baltar expert for the Battlestar Galactica series, mainly because we look alike, and that's kind of the only reason why I ended up clinging to Gaius Baltar a little bit. But other than that, like I said, I was a guest on that, and my level of fandom of both, huge Battlestar Galactica fan, and of course, been a Star Trek fan for a while. Next Generation was kind of my show, and I spilled over and watched a bit of Deep Space Nine because of, a lot of Worf and other characters kind of made their way towards that direction.
And I've been a lifelong Trek fan myself. I watched Next Generation and Deep Space Nine in real time as they first aired. Trailed off towards the end as I went off to college and other youthful activities. But I am so excited about this new golden age of Trek that we're living in. Actually came to Battlestar kind of late. I mean, the show rebooted in 2003, 2004. I don't think I first watched until 2010. But was just absolutely hooked right from the start, and it took me several years to find out why that was and the connection back to Deep Space Nine.
It really is a pleasure. You are the first guests we've had from sort of the established Battlestar podcast.
Right on.
And I really appreciate you coming in. We should also give a tip of the hat to your Set Condition 1 co-hosts, Andrea and Kitsy. Who could not be here today, but you can check them out at Set Condition 1. Every single episode of Battlestar Galactica.
And hopefully in the future we'll be able to reboot it, bring it back for explore some of the other series. But for now it's just the full 2004 reboot.
That is kind of interesting to me. Battlestar, of course, being a reboot itself. Will you be? I assume you'd be looking at Caprica and stuff like that, or would you start from the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. I want to go back for sure and explore the two older series, the original and the 1980, because I've never watched those at all. So I would be the newbie in that, which I think is really interesting. And then I have watched most of Caprica, and I think it would be interesting to go back now that I've watched the 2004 show probably 7 times through now to go back and watch Caprica with a fresh perspective, because it was not a good show, but there's a lot of good things in it that I want.
There's a lot of good lore drops. Plus, of course, we're crossing our fingers that there will be a new Battlestar Galactica series. It was announced 2 years ago, saying it was coming to Peacock, so we're waiting patiently because it has yet to be canceled. So
yeah,
exactly.
Publicly. It hasn't been announced, but it hasn't been canceled either.
Yeah,
so.
We are in a kind of a frustrating era where you can announce TV shows, but then not actually produce them for a decade.
Yes.
And it's just, will this be the year? No.
You're right.
Will this be the year?
Now.
No. But perhaps you may be the first people I've talked to who are excited about the idea of a Battlestar reboot, actually, because most Battlestar was the show that convinced me I could not look down automatically on sci-fi remakes anymore. Like, you know, this is the Battlestar 70s was some of the. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's was missing some stuff. It's fascinating, but bad.
But like all sci-fi of that era was bad. Right. If you go back and look at it, even the stuff that we remember fondly, like, remember as good, it's still bad. But like they were trying their hearts out.
Like, is it that much worse than, say, Lost in Space? I guess that's the question.
Right.
Absolutely
yeah, I mean, it
not.
all had that very 70s, people are wearing capes for no reason, like in space. You're like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Capes were big. I mean, they should come back, but that's a whole other conversation.
I feel like the new Battlestar is going to be all capes all the time.
God,
oh my God, I hope so.
So
Bring back the capes, make Baltar account again.
The hair, like, we need it all. Yep.
God, he was an aristocrat.
Count Baltar.
A running bit from Second Edition 1 was about Count Baltar. Like how dramatic he would be.
Oh, God. You know, we'll get into the episodes in just a second, but Baltar, 70s Baltar, like, he was neither charismatic enough to be like a giant conquering knave, nor was he like foolish enough to be like, oh, I'm afraid, oh, the pain. Like, he sort of just was in the middle of that, and it I don't know. I see why they brought in James Callis. That's
very not splashy villain. No. I mean, he like for someone, like, if you want someone named Count Baltar to be like a truly memorable villain in a show like this, you got to get yourself a Jeremy Irons.
Yeah.
You got to get someone who's going to chew that entire scene apart.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, 100%.
Who will monologue for days.
Yeah.
The theme this week is mindfuckery. In Inquisition, Dr. Bashir is about to go to yet another medical conference when suddenly the station gets locked down by Starfleet Internal Affairs. Director Sloan suspects Bashir of being a Dominion spy, but one who has been programmed to believe he is not a Dominion spy. He's sent to the brig. Sloan is about to move him for further questioning when he is suddenly beamed onto a Dominion ship by Wayoon, who says, "Welcome back." Could Sloan have been right? While we think about that, Kira and Worf beam in and take Bashir back to Deep Space Nine. But they are pissed off. They no longer believe the Doctor's claims of innocence. Things look bleak until O'Brien grabs Bashir with an arm that Bashir knows was injured that morning in a kayaking accident. This whole thing has been a simulation from the start. Sloan comes in, congratulating Bashir on his innocence. "We had to be thorough," he says. "We are from a secret organization called Section 31. We do horrible things for ostensibly good causes and are accountable to no one." A rattled Bashir shares this experience with Sisko and the rest of the staff. No one has heard of Section 31, but no one likes the sound of it.
Section 31. They're always so goddamn smug.
Smug bastards.
They are the smuggest. Like, no one even knows who you are. Like, how do you get off being that smug?
You have a lot of confidence for somebody who has no credibility to carry on with it.
Someone who officially doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, they do have the charisma of William Sadler backing them up.
That is true.
That's worth a lot.
The people that they bring in for Section 31 in these shows are always great, but it's just like, who are you? So this episode definitely landed in that period where, like, in my first watch through as a kid, I had stopped watching or stopped following along at this time. It really was like fairly deep in the Dominion War when I was just like, I no longer know what's happening here. Because the uniform changes.
The uniforms 100%. Got really bad at the end of Deep Space Nine. You're like, ugh. The turtleneck on top of the vest on top of the jet. It's like
kind of much, I guess.
It's very cold in space, Michael. You gotta lay.
That's right.
O'Brien's been working on the heating in Deep Space Nine for like 10 years. You gotta give him a break. So I did go back and watch through the entire series, as an adult, and so I do remember this. But it's one of those that like, on a rewatch, it catches me off guard because I'm like, wait, I remember Bashir being in trouble, but I don't remember why. And I remember it involving his genetic modifications. But this isn't the episode where we learn about that. Everybody knows about that now. what happens here? Oh, it's the medical conference. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all, don't go to any conferences ever in the Star Trek universe.
That's
Specific, like I remembered the scene with O'Brien coming in injured, and so later on when that comes to play out in the holodeck sequence, I was like, that was the payoff right there.
Yep.
Which I think is great, because that's a total throwaway scene in the beginning when Brian coming in, like, oh, you're injured again. And I'm so hung up on thinking, like, this guy would know how to fix a shoulder joint. Like, Bashir would be able to do that. So, like, I mean, I guess maybe they can be like, oh, Deep Space Nine doesn't have all the proper equipment or something like that. But, like, I refuse to accept that Dr. Julian Bashir specifically, not to mention the other amazing doctors we've met in Star Trek universe, wouldn't be able to fix a sprained shoulder.
There was a lot of those moments in the beginning of this, which at first kind of felt like it was setting up a time loop episode, because it kept setting up very specific things. And he was like, oh, I'm just so tired. Yep. And then like he went to sleep and he woke up and he's like, oh, why am I so tired? And I was like, oh, we're going to do some sort of weird time loop things. I didn't remember this episode off the bat, but I do remember when Bashir was kidnapped by the Dominion and was replaced by a changeling.
Yeah.
And that's when he gets outed, is when they find out it was a changeling the whole time. He was like, oh, by the way, pew pew, I'm not totally human, and sorry, bye.
This kind of episode reminds me of like a Hitchcock movie or something. Alexander Siddig would be a good Hitchcock protagonist. I
my
think.
God, yes.
Oh,
like
totally.
he's
Such a brilliant actor.
Yeah, he's handsome. He's unyielding. He
would
arrogant.
make a great Count Baltar.
He would make a very
He would absolutely.
It's a theatrical like model. Like every time he's like, no, I am not a spy, because, like it's just the way his voice fluctuates. Like you feel very theatrical and Shakespearean almost with it.
And like Julian is such a likable character. We know him to be like one of the friendly kind of like almost bumbling ne'er-do-well at times, but like always means well. But then we also know that like he's had these dark secrets. He's got a past that he doesn't like to talk about. So like there's enough plausibility. Like we as the audience don't want to believe that Julian could be a traitor. But then, of course, they do the classic, well, you might not even know. I'm like, oh, so that's how we're gonna justify possibly doing this to one of everyone's favorite characters.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Engrammatic dissociation.
Yeah, is that even a thing?
Engrammatic. I did earlier when we were covering water for Battlestar Galactica. I am gullible enough that I actually went to Wikipedia to see if you could brainwash spies to make them be spies without their knowledge, and you can't.
Yeah, the sleeper cell activate by a phrase.
It's a great plot point, but
I'll admit I was pretty disappointed. I kind of thought, but you know what? It's probably good that you can't do that.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we saw in the MCU, that was the whole Bucky thing, is that, he was activated with a series of random words. We've seen that in spy movies. That was a James Bond thing, I think, for a while as well. Yeah.
And famously, the Manchurian Candidate.
Yep. American Ultra was another one.
Which is a hilarious movie.
That movie was batshit, but it was
Kristen Stewart.
So fun.
I think, for specifically Bashir, I think it's really interesting because he has that sort of indignation for the whole, for the beginning half, and he's like, no, you're wrong. I am this person. And then he's like, no, you're wrong.
Yes.
Maybe, And I think that's really interesting to kind of like, there is a moment where he's like, no, it can't be, possibly, maybe, but probably not. And you just get that moment of self-doubt, which makes you think like, oh, like, shit, he's gonna turn, like he is a Dominion spy, like this that episode where you're like, maybe he is, but then we learned that that's not the case.
And talk about the acting in this cast. That scene when he's in the brig and it's just Siddig and Brooks face to face, and in that moment where Bashir's like, you don't believe me. He's like, I don't think you're lying, and like these two just like powerful actors delivering this like really tense scene where it's like, shit, that's good. That is good writing. That is good acting. That is a beautiful scene.
And Sisko sort of supporting you unconvincedly is much worse than Sisko actively like withdrawing his support. It is so smart on the simulation programmers. Like your friend your friends rally around you, and then they slowly begin to have doubts and step away.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good tool to try to turn him to be like, no, it is me. I'll just confess and call it a day.
Yeah, and I think that was some of the smartest bit of programming for the Section 31 simulation is having Sisko be so insistent, like, no, like, you don't have the authority to do this without me.
At what point did you know that like the whole thing was a simulation?
I'll be honest, I didn't until the moment when as soon as he gets boarded, as soon as Worf comes and rescue him, I was like, this isn't real. As because I was like, this seems like there's something off about this. Like none of this seems real. Like this is, there are four lights like moment of, like that's this moment. And I'm like, something's weird. I didn't necessarily know it was a simulation, but I knew it wasn't actually happening. And I just couldn't figure out. I was like, he's still asleep or something.
Something that I personally want to believe was a nod to Trek fans specifically and not just interrogation stories was when he says, I expected you to interrogate me under bright light. And I'm thinking of there are four lights, which is just another masterpiece show episode in the franchise. So for me, it was actually a 30-year-old video quality error that tipped it for me. It was the first time I saw Wei-Yun. He there was something with the image quality as I was watching the episode that he looked like a hologram, and I was like,
he kind of did.
That's right. This isn't real. They're trying to fool him. I didn't put it all together until after he was rescued and realized when the thing started, because I was thinking at most they beamed him into a holodeck from the brig. I didn't realize that it was all the way back to that comment he makes about how it can't possibly be 7 a.m. sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that was the moments of when he drops the pen and he's trying to find another thing, and then everything's disheveled in his thing. That's the moment where I was like, okay, something is I was like, I don't think they're just searching. I think something is amiss. And then it wasn't until when Worf showed up and was like, Bashir, I got you. And then they get to the bridge and he's like, fuck you. And I was like, wait, but you just came and rescued him? Wait, why would you come rescue him if you're all pissed at him? I don't
Those
understand.
were very out of character reactions for both Kira and
totally.
Worf.
Yep.
That was it for me, actually. And especially Dax, where she's like, how could you do it, Julianne?
Yeah.
And it's
it was very hands on hips, how could you wagging?
It was like, you're naughty.
Yeah, it was like, what is going on?
And it's
Dax being giving someone shit for having secrets or something. No, that's Listen,
she would either be way angrier or way more chill.
Yeah.
She would be like, let's hear him out some more, or she would be like, I'm going to kill you.
Just kill him,
but not just sternly reproachful.
Right.
That's not Dax.
Disappointed mom.
I'm not mad at you for betraying humanity. I'm disappointed with you.
I'm not mad at you for doing an espionage. I guess I love also how good they are at taking plot points from however far back and bringing it back. Oh, you remember that time he was in prison? All of those things that you think those were just wrapped up and done? Nope, we're doing more here.
And it was a plausible thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. You when they bring up the whole idea of oh, he's really a Dominion sleeper, you're like, oh yeah, that's a plausible plot point, based on what the Dominion has done so far and what we've seen in the series. I was like, yeah, sure, we're going that direction with him, I guess. All right, let's go.
I think the other major episode this calls back to is statistical probabilities, where he works with the 4 genetically engineered people and comes up with the idea, we should surrender. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? I love at least the message of statistical probabilities, because it's, in an age that is so much about quantifying data, it's sort of important to remember, you can predict the actions of a group more easily than the actions of an individual.
Psychohistory, man.
And so, it's very, very Isaac Asimov. Very Asimov.
I mean, I think that it brings up a good point too with Bashir and Sisko, when Sisko even says yeah, I didn't agree with him on that decision. And that still felt like a Sisko thing to say. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, I didn't agree with him when he made this decision or this one. And then you're like, oh, seeds of doubt.
Seeds of doubt.
That's also how they play on Bashir's character, because he said, like, it seemed to me like the only way to save the most lives, and I'm a doctor, and that's what I do. Yeah. And so, like, it's easy to say, like we think, like, yeah, he's a doctor, he wants to save people, but they say, oh no, you have the inside information and know that by saying this is your medical recommendation, that Starfleet might listen to what was actually a flawed military plan. And I'm like, oh my God, it hurts.
Yeah. And it's kind of perfect that, Starfleet asked for these recommendations. This wasn't his idea. It is maybe only because of Doctor's self-assuredness and his ego that he was even willing to say, no, I think we should surrender. Mm-hmm. Like, you would be afraid to say that in most places in the military command. And here it gets used against him.
Even most other characters would be at least hesitant, but like Bashir is such a confident person.
Note that the thing that breaks Sisko's confidence is he lied to you. Yep. He lied to you about his genetic. And to me, like, that's one of the most blameless things that he does here, because this was not a decision he made. It was a decision his parents made.
Yeah.
The law, we understand why the law is there, but it's not exactly, I don't see what you get by barring someone from service for being genetically enhanced when they were minor.
Yeah, I think that the franchise as a whole is trying to get somewhere with a cohesive message around that, because even in Strange New Worlds, when it comes out with Una, like, you have Pike like actively defending, like, no, like, this is not something that this person has any control of. This is who they are, and we wrote a law to explicitly ban people from being who they are. It feels like a pretty strong message that they're sending out, and I don't think that they were doing as good of a job in the late 90s. I think they were starting to find that message.
I think that's true. And the thing I appreciate about it is you understand why a society that went through the eugenics wars would pass a law like that. Similar to what goes on with the Cylon era ban on artificial intelligence. Yeah. It's kind of a thing that blames the people who don't have any control over it.
And even when they do that later on in Picard, like, that is a common theme. Like, our knee-jerk reaction would be to just straight up ban the thing that scared us rather than figuring out how to fix it.
Right.
So
nice. As I'm watching Picard season 1, there is a lot of themes of, like, well, I can't be a synthetic. I'm not an android. What are you talking about? There's those, revelations of, like, oh, I really am. Oh, okay. So, like, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the whole franchise has done a really great job, despite the, like, countless people who have written or been involved in the production of episodes, of keeping a reasonable feel of continuity around themes like that and around stories that they tell.
Across decades, which is pretty impressive.
Almost across an entire century at this point. Where, like, I say almost in the grand scheme of things, like, 40 years,
right. But rounding up,
rounding up.
Yeah, that is true, and that is kind of what's impressive. The older I get, the less I care about stuff like continuity issues. I feel like we got to get to where, like, the Doctor Who fans say are, where it's like, Stephen Moffat Gallifrey is different from Russell T Davies Gallifrey. Is
to Chibnall's to
some of
it's
it's
all
just
wibbly wobbly.
It's just another take.
That's when you bake absurdity into your entire premise, it makes it a lot easier to play fast and loose with the rules.
It is very true. I mean, there's so many moments in Chibnall's Doctor Who where I was like, no, you would know that. Or like, wait, that doesn't make you already did this thing, but it's like, it's a different doctor. It's whatever. They forgot. It's fine. They're, thousands of years, well, at this point, millions of years old because of the one Capaldi episode where they ended up living for 7 million years in repetition.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you probably forgot. It doesn't matter. It's fine. Go on. Keep going.
So much of Jodie Whittaker's run has been about exactly that. Like, there's stuff in my past that I don't know. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of this kind of paranoid Star Trek. We don't see it a lot, but boy, does it work, especially with Alexander Siddig. Does this remind you of any other kind of, like, paranoid, I don't know, like 70s shows.
Well, I mean, like the Pigman episode of Twilight Zone is, everyone else is ugly and I look normal, but like they're all pig people, but I'm the human and you're all weird and I'm the, it's kind of that same sort of like, I'm not crazy, you all are, sort of theme, I guess, across everything.
Very Twilight Zone.
I feel like this whole idea of like taking a popular character and like, accusing them of being a spy or a criminal or whatnot is a fairly reused plot point. To the point where like you could say that it's tired, but I feel like they do it so well in this episode that like it doesn't feel like a tired trope, even though like realistically it is. But I love the twist of the like, introducing Section 31 and nobody knows who Section 31 is. And for people who have watched Star Trek for decades, that they with Discovery go all the way back to like pre the original series. And we know that there was supposed to be Michelle Yeoh having her own show, like focused on like there's a bunch of shady shit that just keeps happening and they just pop up every now and then, like, surprise, we're here, and then we're gone. And so like there's a lot of that sense of malice and of subterfuge that they bring every time that they show up.
I was going to mention The Prisoner. Are you familiar with The Prisoner?
Oh, I mean, from years ago, yeah.
Yes,
but
as in like I don't remember, but also yes, familiar.
The scene in particular where Bashir gets into his first interview with Sloane, and Sloane is the nicest guy. Mm-hmm. It's like your dream job interview.
Yep.
But for some reason, when things are too nice, it's unnerving.
Yep.
I don't know why that is, but it is true. And that kind of theme was all over the Prisoner. One thing that amuses me about Patrick McGowan's character in The Prisoner is he has kind of two grades. He has a low, ominous kind of tone, and then he speaks high. And watch a bit of Siddig's acting and a bit of Patrick McGowan's acting in The Prisoner, and I think you'll see what I mean.
I believe that.
Just kind of this kind of constant state of righteous, deserved anger against a bureaucracy. This is a good time to mention that number 6 from Battlestar was named after that show.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Sloane, he finally comes out with his charge. He's basically like, I'm going to accuse you of being a Dominion spy unknowingly. You don't even know that you're a Dominion spy. Now, confess that you're a Dominion spy.
Yeah.
Like, it's very Catch-22,
Right. Yeah, because he tries, and Sloane, you talk about that unnerving niceness in the beginning where he was like, oh, well, you didn't get breakfast? Well, I'm sorry. Let me order you breakfast right now. And then sends him the wrong breakfast.
Intentionally fucking it up.
Right. And it's like, you dick.
And then later on, like, oh, did you enjoy your scones? Like, knowing. Like, you could hear. He knows.
Right. You just see Bashir like, you motherfucker.
I'm not going to play this game. Right. Bashir does a really great job of like, I'm not going to cave, but I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not going to play your game. I will answer your questions, and that's it. It's just.
And once he gets that message from O'Brien, one of the other things he does that I love is that he turns his arrogance up to 11, because he's like, was I alone during solitary confinement?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No, I'm right about how much time it took. Martok was wrong. I'm the right guy. There's no question that I was definitely right.
I'm not saying he lied, which is great, because that's the line that they use on him.
Yes.
Like he's filing all this away. Once again, he's the smartest person in this room, and you may test that assumption at your convenience.
Great quote.
And we do.
I think Section 31 is a really interesting thing for Star Trek universe to toy with, because even as they say in this episode, which was this actually the first introduction? Like this is the first time? Okay, yep. That makes sense. Like they say, like how antithetical Section 31 is to everything Starfleet represents. And it feels really difficult for them to continue, as a writing staff, to continue justifying the bad actions of this rogue organization without putting a stop to it. And it also feels like as they make random appearances throughout the history of the franchise, it's like every time they appear is both their first and their last, quote unquote, because no one ever hears from those people again. And so, like, as far as I know, Section 31, oh, yeah, we looked into that, the admirals, and, like, we gave them a swat on the wrist, and they're gone now. Like, they never are. Yeah. They will 100% always be lurking, and that adds a really interesting element that, again, the franchise can draw from at any time that they want, but also leaves that just little bit of distrust. Like who can we trust in Starfleet leadership? How do we know that like anything we're doing is legit? How do we know that these people won't start another war or something like that? Like, and with the notion of, and maybe it's been canceled at this point, I don't know, but that they're supposed to, having been a Section 31 show bringing Michelle Yeoh's character back, that tells me that Paramount at least thinks that there's more merit in this, which worries me, because at the same time, Paramount has also really, like, whoever they've hired for writing these shows has really leaned into the core values of what Trek is, and Section 31 ain't it. And I don't know how they're going to do core values Trek in a show about a secret espionage society.
I mean, Section 31 is really interesting, though, and I think it's Dax in the end of this episode even says a point, like, well, yeah, of course we have a Section 31. You know, there's the Tal Shiar and, the Romulans, and, everybody has their sort of thing. Like, why would we not? Although, like, we shouldn't, because we're the Federation and we're supposed to be standing on this soapbox and this high horse, and, we're the moral foundation of the entire universe. But at the same time, of course we have a Section 31. Why would we not? And I just think it's a really interesting point. And as we see it kind of, peppered throughout the rest of the franchise, it's like, well, yeah, of course we have it. Of course the Federation has that.
Well, and also like the Borg War, which is what kicked off Deep Space Nine and kind of helped to tie off a lot of the Next Generation plot lines, is the point where Starfleet had to become militarized. I mean, you go back to Discovery, there was the Klingon War, and that was like, shit, like these ships have to do, and like we'll put something together. But like then you have a couple 100 years of peace and exploration and occasional skirmishes, but like exploration and science vessels that are equipped with defensive weapons, not warships. It's the Defiant really that kicks off a subfleet of Starfleet warships, and knowing that like from this moment on, like Starfleet is a military organization and an exploration diplomatic thing.
Sometimes we do an exploration, but a lot of times we do a kill.
It feels like from here on out, of course we have a Section 31. Like in the early days, it would have been like, well, like that's not what we're about. But now, like, it's almost unarguably that is what Starfleet is about, which, for better or worse.
I mean, Picard really, really leans into that too. I'm only in season 1, but it really leans into that with, it talks about like the Federation's decision to kind of let the Romulans, and they're like, nah, just let the Romulans die. Like, what do we care? Right. They've been enemies to us forever. But whereas, in Next Generation, everyone's like, peace and love, man, everybody's accepted. And then we see a little in Deep Space Nine, it's like, everyone's accepted, you've got to fill out a survey first, and then eventually Picard is like, no, just straight up fuck the Romulans again. Like, it just goes right back to like, no, screw your whole race. Like, I don't care. So there's that wave of acceptance that we're seeing.
You heard in the course of the original series in Next Gen, every so often Gene Roddenberry would veto or criticize something because, well, you can't portray, Star Trek VI, you can't portray a coup that would sabotage a peace process. That's not what Starfleet is. And he always seems to be overruled on that kind of thing. And what seems to be the sticking point here is that there's no accountability at all. This is sort of what concerns me about if they did a Section 31 show, would it be the real shades of gray we see here, or would it end up being like some kind of Red Squadron? Here's some badass mercenaries who do whatever it takes. Like, it's not like you have to be afraid of Section 31.
That's what I worry about, is that they would like really lean into like glorifying that, which is, it, in my opinion, is so opposite of what Star Trek is about. if we watched a Section 31 show and still walked away feeling like Section 31 ain't it, man, then they've done it right. But if people are like, fuck yeah, Section 31, like going in and getting the bad guys, then like we fucked up.
Yeah.
As a like
big time.
We as a society are like mutually to blame for that if that happens.
For allowing the
we allowed it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's always those moments, you know, throughout all of Star Trek where it's like, but the Prime Directive, well, this one time the Prime Directive not so much, but like the Prime Directive, you know, but like Section 31 is like, yeah, I don't care about the Prime Directive.
Yeah,
I will leave
off the board entirely.
Yeah, like that's your rules. We live over here where, you know, we shoot people for fun. Like that's where they live.
Yeah, the lack of accountability bit should be scary because like if there's no one that they answer to, then they can literally do whatever they want and no one can stop them.
Yeah,
and since there's no reporting structure on the books,
they are literally secret police.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I love Michelle Yeoh's character on Discovery, but I kind of would hate to. I don't really even want to see her in that role. Like.
Even her doing something kind of like what Seven has been doing in Picard, like since Voyager ended, where like she's just traveling around kicking ass and like sometimes for profit, sometimes to help people, sometimes just because she wanted to,
just for revenge. Yeah. Be like, hey, remember when you tortured me and my friends? Guess what? Now you're dead.
You did.
I was listening to the Mission Log podcast about this episode. And they were really unhappy about Section 31 at all for the reasons we said.
Sure.
And they were like, they really were like college freshmen who took like their first history class that tells you about the bad stuff that happened in America.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, what? How could this be on Star Trek? On Star Trek?
Oh.
And it was so heartbreaking to listen to.
That is a beautiful innocence. Read the bad
Wait a minute.
It is. And I hate to say this, but even with Section 31, they're still sort of better than us because they have one Section 31 throughout the Federation, but we have like hundreds of spy agencies and quasi-accountable. Like I think, like I like Star Trek that is better than us, but not perfect. This still passes the test for me. I don't know.
That to me, since childhood, was always the dream of Star Trek. Is like it's better than us.
Yeah,
like it shows us a future where we can be better, and that's like one of the things that I love the most about it, and one of the ways that it contrasts the most with a lot of other sci-fi.
Yeah. Well, it's a utopia in progress, and that's what I think.
It's a utopia in progress.
Yeah, because it's not full on like dystopian, utopian. I know those are intuitive terms, but like, you know, where everything is one complete way, and everyone's like, "That's the utopia." It's like. No, they're working on it. They've done so much progress. Like they are way closer than we are in real life. And that's what I think is like, you know, it's nice to watch that and be like, yeah, Star Trek. I want that world, you know?
I mean,
science, everything.
Star Trek is a world where we've proven the aliens from the My Teachers and Alien series correct to worry about us, but they gave us a chance anyway.
That's beautiful.
Shout out to Bruce Coville, hometown hero.
Yeah.
6 degrees of separation. Gaius Baltar is being a total asshole to Six, mocking her faith, calling her stupid. He is called to the CIC and finds that all of a sudden, everyone can see number 6. She claims to be a human named Shelley Godfrey. She acts like she doesn't know him and then proceeds to accuse him of betraying the fleet to the Cylons. The proof is in a photo that purportedly shows Baltar entering the Defense Ministry with the explosive device that blew it up during the Cylon attack. Gaeta will work on the photo to see if he can authenticate it, while Baltar continues to freak the hell out. While Adama is suspicious of Godfrey, he is suspicious of Baltar as well. Yeah. And when Baltar realizes he's losing both him and Rosalind's support, he relents, asking number 6's god for forgiveness. Just like that, Six returns to him lovingly, and Gaeta discovers that the evidence was all a fake, probably a Cylon plot. So is that the plan? Tear Baltar down in the public eye so that he could be publicly exonerated? Sure. Now, time for makeup sex.
That's the best summer.
Yeah.
That's also the plot of every Gaius Baltar episode. To be like, I'll do a terrible thing, makeup sex, with my imaginary friend.
I love this episode. Scaring Baltar into faith is a recurring theme throughout this entire show, and this is one of the best ways that they do it. That moment where he walks into the CIC and like just basically starts kind of like flirting with her, but like muttering because he's like they can't see, and like Miss Godfrey has
She's
some pretty
right
serious
there.
accusations, and like, okay, yeah, where is she? I'm like, dude,
It takes him ridiculously long to realize that they can see her, and he's just that stuck in his head, that egotistical.
yeah, and like this episode honestly leaves more questions unanswered than it answers. Not the least of which is like, is she actually there?
Yeah.
Like he's so used to he knows that a physical version of this woman exists because he interacted with her on Caprica. Cool. He knows now about Cylons. All right, so there's copies. So, but the unanswered question of this one that's in his head that I won't spoil for listeners of what we learn about this person down the road. Like, is she real? Is she actually in his head? Is she a Cylon? Is he a Cylon? Like all of these questions, like this episode does nothing to answer them. And it muddies it even more. And I love that because whereas we were just in like the late seasons of Battlestar of Deep Space Nine, and plot points are starting to like unfold and like kind of like tie up. This is episode 6 and Battlestar is just getting started, and you can see Baltar's in for a ride, man.
There's a really interesting thing about this that kind of doesn't really get answered, and it's how did Head Six and Shelley Godfrey like that sort of like synchronization of Head Six goes away, Shelley Godfrey shows up, like how did we never really get the answer of how that timing worked out. Like how did Head Six know to go away and Shelley Godfrey to show up at that moment? Like how did Shelley know to show up at that moment? Because we learned that Six, is not the same, is not Head Six. We learned that very shortly after that, so it's like, non-spoiler for the whole series, but like there is that moment of like, but when did that moment, that sort of trade-off occur where she's like, well, fine, I'm going to teach you a lesson. And then Shelley Godfrey shows up to teach the lesson, so to speak.
We do know that Head Six interacts with the rest of the Cylons.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. She delivers news from them to Baltar at some point.
Yeah.
This has probably been in the works for a while.
Yeah.
Of this timing. Yeah.
Just waiting for Baltar to be really, really arrogant, even for him.
It has to be like well carefully crafted and planned out because like,
the
they
plan
do it with such precision. They're saying like he gets mouthy and suddenly there's a transmission from this other ship that like someone's got news about Baltar. He asks for forgiveness. They destroy the ship because it's full of Cylons. Oh, he's saved. He gets mouthy. Oh, like this woman shows up with this. That's like the whole recurring joke that I was talking about earlier with Baltar. But that also does demonstrate that like, while we might not know what the hell the plan is, they've clearly planned something.
Yeah.
I mean, Baltar is also a really great example of a person who continuously falls upward. Because like he just like accidentally gets out of, because like he spends the entire series being like, I'm not a traitor, being like, okay, so that one time, yes, I definitely was a traitor, but I'm not a traitor, and I'm not going to tell you about that time, but definitely not a traitor.
Battlestar is always obsessed with the question of, like, how do you punish people if you kind of need them? And, this is, like, I feel like this is the same kind of guy as, like, Boris Johnson or something, where, like, people have decided that they're just gonna allow him to sort of fall upward, as you said.
Like,
and
continuously
have sex
gets
with
no
lots of
accountability,
people.
right? Yeah.
And it is kind of funner. I feel like you see more of those guys in the public. I mean, Elon Musk, maybe another example. Like you see more
example.
You see more guys like this.
If that show were made now, Gaius Baltar would absolutely have been a tech CEO that was just like blustery and like full of it, but like everyone loved because they like thought he had groundbreaking ideas when really he was stealing them from the Cylons or something. Yeah. But like it like we talked about how Bashir is arrogant because he knows he's the smartest person in the room, and like he's just like that's objectively true. I feel like Gaius Baltar is an arrogant man who also happens to be reasonably smart and like speaks high enough above other people's heads that like even if he's not the smartest person in the room, he fakes it. And so like you have this, like Michael, you said that unearned sense of self-importance that he has. And like they're in a lot of ways such similar characters, but they come to this like by completely different paths, and like at their core they are not the same at all.
No. They both are defending this sort of accusation against them with the same sort of arrogance. And, we as you mentioned, like Bashir has that. But like, I think there was also the point where Baltar would love to think he's the smartest person in the room. But I think he also has this feeling of like, at any moment, someone's going to call me on it, and then I have to back it up, and I don't want to. Baltar is smart, right? Like, we know that Baltar is a smart person. He is responsible for advancements in society. We learned that episode 1 that, he isn't faking it completely, but I think he has that sort of arrogance, but also at that same time, self-doubt of like, oh, but now I have to actually do something about it. We see that with the Cylon detector, yes, he's making it, and it is an advancement, a crazy advancement. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, but any minute now, someone's going to be like, so how does it work? And he's going to be like, it totally detects Cylons and things. Like, now he's got to explain it. And I think it's that sort of like, oh, yeah, you are smart, but how? And he's like,
he does that to Adama and Tai. He starts to like technobabble at them, and they're like, you know what, we don't care. Just make it work.
And I feel like that's, yes, he is smart, but that's definitely what got him out of a lot of situations is he was like, oh, well, you put the Johnson rod in the blah, blah. And they're like, bah, it's too smart for me, man. You just be smart. Here's money.
Bashir is much more confident than Baltar.
Yes.
And I like, one of the things that we said in our earlier episodes was, season 1 Bashir is much closer to Baltar.
Yes.
But after 6 years of living on the frontier and interacting with different people and realizing that Dax doesn't love him, he matures. Mm-hmm. And this thing that was like a girl chasing ego to him is now the very thing that sort of keeps him sane and allows him to stand up to Section 31 brainwashing.
Yes.
Is it a case of there, but for the grace of God go I with Gaius Baltar?
Julian comes on to Deep Space Nine all like raring to go frontier doctor, but then like stumbles like crazy because he's not there yet, but he gets there, and his ability begins to match his arrogance, which boosts his confidence, and he becomes more of a tolerable person. He's also hiding this big secret, but it's something that like it's something about his core being of who he is that he can't change, but also is illegal. So he's going to get in trouble for it. Gaius is hiding a huge secret where he contributed to the destruction of humanity. These are not the same man.
No.
and the thing is like Bashir gets captured by the Dominion, tortured for like a week, right? Mm-hmm. Gaius Baltar literally Six just like, hey, and he's like, what do you want to know? There's no I shouldn't do this. He's just like, here's everything. I totally did it. Whatevs, But I think that's really interesting that, Bashir is like, no, I'm going to do the right thing always. And Gaius Baltar is like, I'll be fine.
I think you're spot on, though, that like Bashir is like the best case and Baltar the worst case of like the two forks in the road for this person who at one point was essentially the same.
It's the Peter Parker, Eddie Brock scenario, right? Like, what if, or I guess, in Spider-Man 3, but not necessarily in everything else. But in Spider-Man, it's like, this is what happens if Peter would have went bad. This is what happens if, he stayed the same. And that's that sort of road is Bashir's like, no, I have a good moral foundation. I have a good core, whereas Gaius Baltar's like, I only want to protect me. Like, I don't care who else I have to step over. Like, it's self-preservation above anything else.
Well, and it always has been too.
Sure.
You know, we learn again, without giving anything away, that he's also running from other things in his past and has tried to become a different person. And so, like, he's built this front that he has to maintain at all times. And I feel like the purest Gaius Baltar that you ever see in these shows are the episodes where, like, you find him just lurking in an empty room smoking. Like, that is Gaius Baltar at his most fundamental.
I was kind of moved by the scene where you see him alone in that swinging bachelor pad in his head, intercut with scenes of him talking to Adama and realizing that he's lost Adama's support, like as a double whammy kind of attack on both Baltar's public image and his sort of private life.
Well, sure. And I mean, Adama is somebody he respects too. Sure. So, like, hearing that from Adama, where he doesn't particularly care for Rosalind, but Adama, that hurt,
Yeah.
That's another big contrast between him and Bashir, where Sisko fully respects and trusts Dr. Bashir, and like, even if that was a simulation of Sisko, it was accurate to see him like torn up at the idea that like that trust might have been betrayed. Adama doesn't trust Dr. Baltar at all. Doesn't like he finds him.
No one
like,
does.
Yeah, he finds him necessary and useful for the time being, but like the moment that proves to not be the case, like that man is off of Galactica at best. He's off of Galactica one way or the other. Whether it's on a ship is debatable. And so like that trust relationship was so tenuous. But to your point, Michael, like that was so important to Baltar because he needs that. Like he
likes
people
the prestige of it
to believe in him. And that's part of that act that he plays 24/7.
Well, in the whole beginning of the series, Rosalind has just come to power, and the respect for Rosalind isn't there yet, but everybody respects and loves Adama. Like everybody knows Adama.
You're goddamn
and
right.
he's pretty much in charge. So hearing that from Adama, whereas he hears it later from Rosalind, when he hears it from Adama, it's a cut to his pride. But when he hears it from Rosalind, it's a cut to his self-preservation, which is his number one priority. Yep. And that was like, ouch. And this one was like, oh shit, like I have to fix that, so like quickly. I think Gata's trust in this is very interesting because like Gata has a very interesting journey, let's say, throughout the Battlestar Galactica series, but seeing Gata being like, no, I think something's wonky with this, like I'm gonna really, really look into it, instead of everyone else was like, well, there's the photo. Like, I guess go look to see if it's real. But nope, that's the photo. That's all I need. Ty is even like, he's gone. I don't care. Yeah. Dama's like, I don't trust you. Put him in a cell. But Gata was like, I don't know. I'm really going to do my due diligence on this, which cool for Gata. But at the same time, like, was he right for doing it? I mean, because like, she's right. Like Shelley Godfrey is right. We all know that she's right because that's episode 1. That's literally like the first 20 minutes of the series. But like, it's like, Gata did the right thing, but it came to the wrong conclusion. Like, but no, but
he did the thing.
He's neither right nor wrong. He's professionalism.
Right,
gets the job done.
He is doing the right thing. He is, but it's the problem is that it ends up exonerating somebody who he ends up exonerating a criminal. Which
like that's a great point though. Like and this is something that we have legal precedent for in the real world. And like you could get the right person for the right crime with the wrong evidence, and you did it wrong, and like game over. Like that person's free now, and so like that's like. I'm kind of glad that like I like that they held this in front of him and like put him in peril, but I'm glad that they didn't use that as like, well, that's it, like Baltar's busted, when like we all knew that it was faked.
Right. It's like, I did murder them, but not that way. Haha.
I did murder them, but you just didn't have the proof.
Right. Yeah, it's a very, and that kind of goes back to that Bashir point where Bashir even starts to question himself, but it's kind of the opposite way, because Baltar really puts up the front that makes it be like, no, I didn't do this. But then in his head is like, remember when we totally did that? And it's so weird to see him be like, no, I'm innocent. Like, he's fighting tooth and nail, but it's strictly that self-preservation and not that sort of moral, aptitude that Bashir has. It's not coming from a moral standing. It is coming from self-preservation purely. And it just it's the same speech. Bashir and Baltar give the same speech essentially.
Yeah.
But it feels grimy when Baltar's saying it, but it feels redeeming and majestic when Bashir's doing it. But it's the same speech, basically.
It's Bashir's confidence in his own image versus Baltar's like desperation to exonerate himself from something that he knows he did. Simply because he knows that they don't actually have real evidence, but like he also recognizes that like the people that would be trying him in this case don't care. There's still enough of a wartime mentality at this that like if there's even a hint that you're the one that started this, you're gone. We don't care. We're not going to talk about it. We just saved humanity from their perspective, or we vindicated humanity at least. So, like,
I think this is an important episode for the rest of the cast. Honestly, basically, the running joke is when Baltar is caught, he pretends he's talking to himself, and he kind of, when Baltar lies, I began to notice he kind of lies in the same way that Walter White from Breaking Bad lies, in the sense that like he doesn't lie good. No. But he lies with the absolute confidence that his lie will work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it does. You see him talk to Dee in this, and he's like, yep, I talk to myself. Hang me.
Hang me. Yeah.
And it's like, it is so satisfying that, because that couldn't work forever. I mean, we know that.
No.
Right.
So at this point, I mean, it is probably smart for the Cylons to be like, let's put this guy through the ringer. He gets more humble, and we make it look like we want him out of the way. Win-win. The kind of liar Baltar is unusually obnoxious, even for lying, in my opinion.
But this also is kind of a risky move for the Cylons in general, because it tips their hands to another model a lot earlier than they strictly had to. Well, shit, like now this is another person that we have to watch for. Now we have our list is up to 3. We've been told there's 12. So like you're narrowing it down.
They definitely burned a Cylon. Yeah.
It was her adamance where she was like, Baltar's guilty and blah, blah, blah. Like she was just so over the top that I think you even see that moment of Adama Atai where he's like, watch her, don't let her leave, lock her down, like follow her secretly.
She also messed up by being a little bit too 6 when she was alone with Adama, because like he's not going to fall for it.
That's what tipped him off, I think, completely.
Yeah. And thinking about this, I do occasionally it just plain bums me out that like honeypotting apparently works.
Yeah.
Like, can't these admirals rent a video or something? I don't know.
I know, right? I mean, he's got Roslyn, this whole time. Like, he doesn't...
Right.
6 is clearly not his type. If we look at his ex-wife and Roslyn, like, 6 is not she's barking up the wrong tree for Adama's type.
But
Ty,
I think,
however, she can take Ty down in a heartbeat. Hell, just buy him a drink.
Oh, yeah. Clearly, working with Baltar, I guess it wasn't the same 6, but presumably they share some kind of... Like, clearly working with Baltar has sort of dulled her game, because, like, he will buy anything. He's made that clear.
She doesn't even have to try.
And she's like... What her lines are, what was it? I can't believe this is real. I feel so lonely.
Yeah.
I bet you feel lonely, too.
Yeah. I like that he kind of was like, what is happening right now when she kisses him? And I like that it is immediately after he's like, follow Shelley, don't let her leave the ship. Like he instantly knew. And I love that about Adama, that you don't ever get like a moment of wavering, which I feel like in any other show you would have gotten a moment of wavering where he's like, I don't know, I think I may defend her because she was flirty with me. But Adama's like, who the fuck are you?
Something's wrong here.
What is wrong with you? Like, no, this is wrong. And I love that about Adama in this. And I think it's a big juxtaposition because you see 6, she literally just barely looks at Baltar, and his pants are at his ankles, and he's like, whatever you want.
Yep.
You know, she full on kisses Adama, and he's like, you can leave my office now. You know, like, so she realizes, oh shit, I can't six my way out of this one.
Yeah. And it's great too that like Adama, he explores Six's culpability.
Yes.
But he's suspicious of both Six and Baltar at this point. Like he doesn't mean just because I don't trust this one doesn't mean the other is automatically true.
Exactly. This woman
that's important.
Potentially being a Cylon does not leave Gaius Baltar being a traitor out of the realm of possibility in the least. In fact, if anything, it could be the Cylons burning their own operative for all he knows.
Sure. I mean, and Adama's right on both accounts, right?
He's absolutely
right to not trust either of them.
His instincts are often correct. Yeah. Not always.
One thing I like about Shelley Godfrey, first up, I love that the first thing they do is take away Callus's apple box, so she's like a foot taller than him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm also kind of happy irrationally that this show is keeping the sort of glasses equals smart stereotype alive.
It does.
Because she's... It reminded me. I remember watching like Knight Rider when I was a kid, and like Michael Knight has to infiltrate a science museum. So suddenly, Michael Knight's wearing glasses and carrying a folder. It's like, see,
that's how you know
smart.
he's a scientist. Yep. That
glasses equals science.
Yeah, every single time.
Classic.
Yeah, which ends up being a kind of a not really like a Chekhov's gun, but at the end when he picks up the glasses and is like,
like she was here. I know she can't just disappear. Yeah. She was here, and like the glasses are tangible proof that she was there. So where is she?
Right. Yeah, how did she get off the ship? Where did she go? Because they say like nobody left the ship. Like that is another one of the mysteries of like she's basically just sulking around the Galactica, and eventually makes her way off. And of course, we see eventually what happens to her later, but I think that's a very interesting like moment of like, she literally just disappears because it feeds into that sort of head six.
Yeah. Now I did hear your episode on Battlestar Galactica, The Plan, and it reminded me that, it is finally revealed that what happened is basically that she turns a corner, another Cylon grabs her, and then a third Cylon wearing a wig comes out the door during the time that she's out of sight. And it's just so disappointing.
It was a little too cowboy shuffle, and and it definitely, the irony, and we talk about this in that episode, but the irony of the plan is that it doesn't really make the case that they do actually have a plan. It really kind of shows that they kind of don't.
I actually kind of write that off as canon, even though I know that it technically is, because you want to believe that there is a plan, but when it comes down to it, there absolutely was not.
Well, it just comes down to, and particularly with this, it just comes down to like, don't explain stuff like that. Yeah. It is so much better to leave it unsure. Maybe she did vanish. Who knows?
Right.
She probably didn't. And believe me, it's not even unrealistic. Like, I would believe if some security expert came in and said, "Oh yeah, that's a technique. We use that all the time to extract our spies." Sure. Like, I would believe it. But that's not the point. The point is, it's just disappointing. I don't know.
I do kind of like, so there's the recurring theme of the supernatural, like, is this actually God? Are there guns? What are the angels? All of this stuff throughout this show. So there's a lot of religion and a lot of like semi-magical things that happen, and it would be easy to say like, oh, that was Head Six. She made herself visible to everyone, and then when it was convenient to her, she disappeared back into Gaius's head.
Yeah.
But that leans really heavy into the mysticism of the show. That's the word I was looking for, which I was perfectly willing to accept. But I also kind of like that they gave us that element of like, it actually wasn't mystic at all. Like, we just swapped her out and like,
I guess we snuck her on, snuck her off, and so like,
they're like, I both dismiss it and appreciate it. I'm of two minds. I can't decide.
How does the Shelley Godfrey adventure change the way you see number 6, if at all?
So to me, this entire series is about how good of an actor Tricia Helfer is.
Yeah.
I don't care what else you tell me this show is about. this show is about Tricia Helfer can fucking act. And
Yeah.
the one thing that she does so well is each iteration of Six is very obviously a Six. Like there are certain common traits that we have. I mean, her trying to Six her way into Adama's pants. Very on brand for her. But every time she's on screen, she is a different person.
Yeah,
and
you feel it too.
If anything, I think that this is really just our first introduction to how good Tricia Helfer is at taking the direction of like, there's a bunch of you. Some of them have different names. And she just fucking runs with it and like creates entire personalities. And I don't know how much of that is written for her versus how much of that is her natural ability to embody a character. I tend to lean towards the latter because she does it so well and because she does it every time. It's not a fluke where, like, as Shelley Godfrey, she's a little bit, like, timid and like, well, you don't know. And then later on, she's like, I'm fierce and in charge. Like she does that every time so well.
She's one of the few Cylons that we meet that actually pulls that off, whereas most of the Cylons all have kind of the same sort of personality. They all act sort of the same as we meet them. I mean, Doral's a really great example that he's Doral every time we meet him.
Doral is hands down the least interesting of the Cylons.
And we have
That's
the
his
two
superpower, though.
Right,
It's just boringness is a superpower.
Yeah, and we have the two boomers at this point who are basically the same character, but we see Shelley Godfrey and we see a Six. I mean, we see a very brief moment of Shelley Godfrey kind of pull out the Six, but we see between Shelley Godfrey of being like, I know, you don't understand, like, that's not what this is, but then we see the other Six like, no, that's exactly what it is, because I just said it's exactly what it is, and that's how it is now, and you're like, yes, ma'am, but, like, the other Shelley is like, I have proof, and you don't understand, like, there's such a big difference in their personality, and then even later when we get Caprica Six, like, it is, there is very big differences, like, they, even when we see, I say Caprica Six in the beginning, like, they are all very different people, and that's, I think 100% due to her acting ability.
Yeah.
And, like, Shelley Godfrey as a character comes across as believable. Like, the first time I saw this episode, I thought, like, is this, like, wait, is that which Six is this?
Right.
And, like, does she actually know? Like, was she there?
Yeah.
Obviously, her story unravels, but, like, she plays that so believably that it, like, the first time I saw this, it shook my understanding of the events so far. And that, again, I cannot say enough how that exemplifies what we can come to expect from Tricia Helfer in this show. So it doesn't necessarily change my opinion of Six so much as establish that fact, that truth, that Tricia Helfer is going to be the star of this show.
What's remarkable, too, is she had some of the least experience of anyone coming on to this series. Both her and Grace Park were models who turned actors.
I did know that about Grace Park. That's interesting about Tricia Helfer.
And, like, there are some absolute powerhouses on this cast. I mean, no one comes close to EJO.
Of course, yeah.
Absolute legend. Love it.
I would say between her, Ty, and probably Baltar, they were probably the most fun characters to act out because they get the craziest of scenes. Like Ty, like arguably Ty throughout the series gets the wildest of scenes that he gets to act out, whether they're dramatic or just insane. Baltar, same thing. Like Baltar just gets to be this crazy, insane, but like also, like show off his smarts every so often person throughout the series. And Six gets to play like 12 people. It's great, that we get to see that sort of like experience of like they get to have the most fun in terms of the actual acting, whereas everyone else is kind of like, I'm the one character, I'm very serious, like maybe Starbuck, but like Starbuck really is, she's Starbuck, the whole series. She doesn't, she has that same sort of personality, whereas Baltar's like, I'm wacky waving arm man. I get to do whatever I want all the time.
That's true. He is the biggest genre flipper.
Yeah.
This episode happens at an interesting time in the series. They started getting some network notes of like, okay, but can we please have some relief from this tension? It's like, well, okay, we got the torture episode coming up. We just did the Act of Contrition where 20 pilots died.
Oh my god, such a dark opening to the season.
Yeah. But okay, I guess we'll get you some positives. So they come up with this comedy, and it's remarkable how much a comedy it can be without losing the high stakes of the series. Like there's usually comedic relief. I feel like this episode has dramatic relief. Like we laugh at Baltar, and then it cuts down to like Adama worrying, and then it's back to more yucks with Baltar. Like it's really something.
Or even that like throwaway line from the chief when Starbuck hobbles into the hangar bay and he's like, "Your boyfriend's being a real asshole."
Right.
Then Starbuck is like, "Well, she's a girl," and then he goes, "Well, if you don't mind a little goo on your face, she's all yours." And it's like I love the way the chief like immediately corrects his filthy jokes.
He's right on
for
top
the proper.
of it.
And so it's delightfully fluid.
Oh, we also get a very serious cut with Ty doing like the reverse psychology thing on Starbuck when she's sitting in the bed and he's like, "Yeah, I figured you'd still be here. You know, that's good. We don't want you on the bridge anyways." And she's like,
that scene was
"Screw
fucking
you, Ty."
hilarious.
Yeah.
The dynamic between Ty and Thrace is so good.
Yeah.
And like at times it's like they're like right at each other's throats. Other times it's just little barbs like that. And like Ty is like super quick with them. He never misses a chance.
Yeah. You're manipulating me, and
Yes.
I'm buying it. Here I go.
Right. But I'm doing it because out of spite and not because you're trying to get me to do it. Just so we're clear.
I do love the one-upsmanship in that whole plot line. I like,
Yes.
you know, you see Lee down there. It's kind of intimate when your friend uses your crutches, I imagine. You know what I mean? Like you have to be really close to do that.
Right. I mean, it's also hinting at, you know, the bigger relationship, the closeness of the relationship.
But I believe this is the second week with the Cylon Raider. This is also the scene where Boomer comes in and sort of I think they were trying to make her like talk like a vampire or something. It's like, no, you can't treat it like an object. It's a pet. You know, she soothes it. She like massages it, and it just does not seem very massageable to me.
No.
I don't know.
I like that scene for a couple reasons. One, at this point, like even like we know, but like it's still questionable if Sharon actually knows who she is and what she is. And this is one of those moments where it feels like that Cylon consciousness is coming to the surface, and she's really appreciating herself, and it sows those seeds of doubt in the Chief's mind as he's watching her like, it's kind of weird how into this you are. But for us, the audience, it also gives us that additional context of like, oh, maybe the Cylons aren't just like even the Centurions and the Raiders and the base ships and whatnot. Maybe they're not just machines. Maybe like Cylon evolution as a whole has gone this like completely different route. And what are the implications of that for us, like in this wartime? And like, you know, we thought we were shooting down unmanned drones, like, but like you're telling me that this is basically like a horse or a beast of burden. Like that changes things a bit. It changes things for us as the audience as we learn that there's going to be a lot more meat in this show than we thought.
Like inside the Cylon Raider.
Oops, all meat.
It's all meat. I kind of assumed in You Can't Go Home Again that like the Cylon Raider was dead and Starbuck was kind of flying a corpse.
Yeah.
It seems like they think it's conscious and alive.
Yeah.
It definitely feels more like a dog, a horse, you know, like some sort of creature.
I think that they're all acting under the assumption that the Raider is dead. I think when it got shot down and crashed and she found it, I think, and ripped, you know, its guts apart to get up in it, I think it's safe to assume that it's dead, and she just was able to figure out that in addition to like this new information that this is a biological organism, it also somehow has manual flight controls, which is the hardest thing to suspend disbelief about in this, possibly in this entire series for me, is that this creature that was bred into a machine capable of like flight and warfare also can be like manipulated from the inside. That implies that there was an intent and like potentially test flights of people up in a live Raider. Or like bare minimum, it implies that they planned for being able to pilot one that had been shot down.
I mean,
bare
it's just
minimum.
Ratatouille style that she's like getting up in a silence
so
into this thing, like,
weird.
I'll just turn it this way, that way. Like, that's basically what it
Tubes
is.
and air sacs and like.
Yeah.
When
well,
she
it's also-
finds the oxygen line, I'm like,
Yeah.
how? What? How?
Why would it need an oxygen line if its sole purpose is to fly in space? I don't understand.
There's got to be like, I like this idea so much that I want it to work, even though I'm afraid it might not. But like,
Yeah.
if there was like, if where Starbuck was, if there was like a brain, and the brain was attached to muscles that moved all these things, I might buy it.
Where she's just putting nerve endings
And if-
together and hoping
yeah.
for the best.
Doesn't
So,
she
like-
make some sort of like offhand comment about like pulling out its brain or pulling out its guts or something like that? I feel like in the
Let's say
episode
pulling out its guts. Yeah.
previously where she like flies it, I feel like she makes some sort of like passing comment about that.
Yeah. The other thing is maybe the intelligence isn't in the brain, but maybe it's in the controls somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to think about that, but like,
Maybe the maybe the meat is actually a living creature that is like handling the controls.
yeah. I think that's.
I don't like that. I don't
Yeah,
like that
but-
at all.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I mean, it has been established firmly. You know, the Raiders don't have pilots; they are pilots.
Yeah.
So, like, the only way to make that happen if it's like a brain, because if it's like a life form that leaves, that's a pilot.
Yeah.
So, all right. It's like Krang from the Ninja
It's
Turtles.
Krang,
or something.
yeah.
It is Krang. Yeah.
Oh, it's Krang, but he can never leave.
Oh.
Just like, yeah, he's stuck trying to get home to Dimension X.
I don't like this.
Yeah. You know what? I've spent way too much time thinking about this.
Or they're
It's
like
cool.
Daleks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just
Daleks.
Daleks.
Raiders.
Yeah.
There you go.
That could be the closest analog we have. Is Raiders
I'd
are
buy them.
essentially
Just
Daleks.
locked in their machine. Yeah.
I'd buy them as Daleks. I've been trying to keep track of this. This is 24 days since the fall of the 12 colonies and the end of 99% of humanity. And I forget that easily whenever you think about how sort of dumb or shocked the characters might be. You know, 3.5 weeks ago was the worst day of any of their lives. Yeah.
One of the most interesting dramatic plot drivers in this show is how much shit they throw at these people so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, world's literally destroyed, you're on the run, but like, no, every half an hour we're on you. And then like we fuck with your water supply, and then it's your food, your fuel, like it's just like one thing after another. And then there's a traitor, and then there's like, here's a new Cylon for you to deal with. Like, they just like they don't let up, and that creates so much ongoing dramatic tension that like it feels like this show has to take place over like years and years, but like the entire run of the show is over what, like 3-4-ish years.
Yeah, I mean, and only a day or two ago, they had the whole Bastille Day incident
Right.
too, with Zarek rising up and you know prisoners dying and stuff like that. Just happened, you know, on top of active contrition, you know, on top of all that, like all of that literally just happened like the other day.
Yeah.
And now they're like, Baltar's a spy, and everyone's like, what the fuck?
And a lot of people are like, yeah, of course he is.
Yeah, probably, but
pretty much.
come on, man, give us a break for a minute.
Since you have talked and thought so much about this show, maybe we could talk about Cylon Occupied Caprica a little bit.
Okay.
I usually kind of skip over it, but like...
Sometimes I feel like the show does too.
Yeah.
I realized something. I really like Grace Park and Tamino Pennicott.
Oh yeah.
But I don't really
Yeah.
like their dialogue in Cylon Occupied Caprica. It's kind of basic.
It
But I like
gets-
them. Like, you could have a silent movie just with the two of them, and I would love it. What do you
It gets
think?
better. It gets better later, but it definitely gets to the point where like they're talking, and you're like, "What is this? Like a romance novel?"
Hilo is my favorite himbo in the
Yeah.
show. He
really is.
He is a wonderfully lovable dumbass, and I love that about him. The number 8 model is really interesting in that like that level of corniness. Like you talk about it being like Grace Park's first acting role, but like level of corniness I would attribute more to like the writing of that character than to her skill as an actor, for sure. And like she just like the number 8 model is very shallow. Like she's only got so many tricks, and once you get to that point, she just kind of like repeats. And so like she's already been doing this with the chief, but now like this is a new one on Caprica, and she's starting to woo Hilo, and so you have this like really shallow romance storyline, but Hilo is dumb enough to fall for it, and that's what makes it so beautiful, because Hilo's dumb, he falls for it, and then she actually falls for him, and now they've got to justify this shit. They're just running around on Caprica, no idea what the hell they're doing, because they're all like completely just winging it. Hilo didn't plan to stay behind on the planet, but like it happened. This 8, I don't think, planned on actually falling in love with Hilo, but it happened, and they're like, shit, what do we do?
Part of what is awkward about them, I am beginning to suspect is sort of awkward on purpose, in the sense of, I think the Cylons are trying to figure out human love, and that fits right into romance. I mean, I guess I feel like once you've been on a radiated planet for a month with only one other survivor, like at a certain point, if you felt something for someone, you would say it. It supplies romance, but still within the bleak, questioning style that we have come to expect and love from Battlestar Galactica, you know?
Well, and it's a more believable romantic storyline than most of what Hollywood gives us, to be honest. Like the people that meet for the first time for like an hour and a half and they're like ready to be married, versus like these are longtime friends and colleagues in a like alone, you know, on a hostile environment in a survival situation. Like that's a very believable story. But then we also have the subplot of learning that the Cylons think that love is the missing ingredient for them to be able to reproduce. So she's got to go out and get Hilo to fall in love with her. Surprise, he already did that for her. Like, that's done.
Yes. Mission accomplished.
I think this is a really interesting scene, like all these scenes too, because they definitely serve the purpose to show that Cylons exist, like other Cylons exist, right? Like these Caprica scenes exist to, one, pit the boomers against each other between Chief and Hilo, and then to show that the Cylons are on the planets being like, well, now that we did that, now what do we do? Like, what's the next step? Like, oh, well, all the humans are dead, but like, we really don't, we want to go get them still, but like, we're just kind of chilling here for a bit. It feels a little weird. And at first this romance feels a little shoehorned in as like we need a reason to be looking at Caprica. And I think this was at first felt like the reason, but then later on in the series, I'm like, no, I see why you did this.
You could be generous and say that they're setting up the long game of us later seeing like what the Cylon society is like and how they have their, you know, unanimous decision making.
It is more interesting in retrospect. I think I agree with you, Michael. It's like it's more interesting when you can see the whole thing coming. And the time it almost feels like a old Republic serial or something. It's like it plays 2 minutes before the movie you came to see. But
it definitely feels like it was like trying to give backstory or more story when it could have, you know, peppered it in a little other ways, you know. But
every time then they're like, meanwhile on Cylon occupied New Caprica, and I'm like, oh, right, they're still there.
Right.
Oh,
there are millions of Cylons literally chilling on all of the planets, just kind of hanging out. Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing where like we don't really ever get a chance to see the other colonies, which I think would have been interesting. The fact that they focus so much on Caprica, it does become a plot point later, but like I think it's interesting that like we just fuck Toron, I guess.
Right.
Right.
There is one thing I like about it, which is, you know, there are so few characters named Carl on television. And most of them are creeps. Yeah. Like, honestly, like the Carl and Jessica Jones was a creep. Chicken Sandwich Carl from the state. No one's looking. But Carl Agathon, you know, he's himbo though he may be. He's out there taking it for us Carls.
he just wants the best for everyone. He's looking out for his friends. He's looking out for his wife. He's looking out for his kid. Like he wants the best for everyone. He is the most fiercely loyal person. And I will have words with anyone who speaks ill of Carl Agathon.
Right on. These episodes have been Inquisition for Deep Space Nine and 6 Degrees of Separation for Battlestar. The theme is mindfuckery. And which episode did you prefer watching? Who wins this week?
Because I had watched it the least, and it had the most surprise for me. I think the Deep Space Nine episode. Plus, again, I love Battlestar, but I came to that late in life. Trek is part of my core memories of who I am as a child, as a person. So I'm gonna default to Trek over just about any other show most of the time.
I'm on a Star Trek. I'm on a Star Trek kick right now. So Star Trek Deep Space Nine wins this episode for me, but it also wins because I felt the frustration along with Bashir of him fighting for his innocence. But the entire time that Baltar's fighting for him, I'm like, shut up, Baltar. Literally fuck off. I don't want Baltar to win. Like, you're like, no, but you are bad. That's the problem. I don't want you to win. And you keep arguing. Like, it's frustrating because you're like, you are literally lying. We all, as an audience, know you are lying. It's very frustrating to watch you win because you're not the likable character. Like, you're not lying because you're likable. You're lying because you're a slime ball. Yeah. And that's what I think makes this better, is because you watch Bashir and you're like, no, Bashir, you can't possibly be bad. You're such a cool guy.
Bashir.
Right.
We
like, you
Bashir,
want him to win.
We know that Baltar's full of shit. So, it's a completely different experience as the viewer.
I think, without question, this is probably the best Bashir mindfuck of all the Bashir mindfuck episodes. This was
a very good
best
choice.
Done one.
Yeah.
And so Deep Space Nine wins. I'm going to put in a minority report for Battlestar just because I feel like we needed it at that point.
Sure.
And we've got Flesh and Bone coming up, and we've got other comedy episodes that are not really as successful. But I think this is probably the most successful kind of comedy BSG could do.
Yeah.
But Deep Space Nine wins this episode of Battle Space Nine. Thank you very much, Caleb and Michael. This is really good to have you.
Thank you, Carl. It's great to be here.
What is there anything you want to plug?
Oh, absolutely. So Michael and I, we run a network of shows, Night Shift Radio Network. You can check us out at nightshiftradio.com. A bunch of great shows for people who love audio fiction. We had, as we mentioned, Second Edition 1 was a Battlestar watch along. Superhero movies, bad and obscure movies, like basically something for just about everyone we're trying to do. So nightshiftradio.com, and if you like something, give us a subscribe and follow along, and of course keep following this show, because Carl, you've got something awesome going here.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Tune in next week for Deep Space Nine's The Wire and Battlestar Galactica's Flesh and Bone.
Nice.
And the theme is Love and Pain. For Battle Space Nine, I'm Carl. Thank you.